Servus, Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. On Tuesday last week, our dear foreign minister, Frau Baerbock, said something very, very strange, and that is that we are at war with Russia. This is, of course, a very disturbing statement coming at the current situation, and a lot of international media have picked that up. And the Russian foreign ministry also demanded a clarification. What does that mean? Did Germany now declare war on us? I also read some of the international reports and I thought that I wanted to clarify a couple of things about Frau Baerbock and about where and what she actually said. A very lazy and standard excuse from the side of the government or Frau Baerbock is now that this has been taken out of context, etc. No, I want to give you the full context. I want to tell you where she said that and what happened before and what the topic was that was being discussed. And then after that, in today's talk, I also want to comment on the main battle tank Leopard 2 A6, I believe, that Germany wants to deliver to Ukraine in order to fight against Russia. And of course, it doesn't end there, as you might imagine. In the beginning, it was about some RPGs and some additional material, some ammunition here and there. Then they talked about armored vehicles, anti-aircraft vehicles, etc. And now we're at main battle tanks. But on the same day, they went on to demand now fighter jets and other stuff, like submarines and artillery. If Germany had any nukes, I'm sure by now they would be asking about nukes. But well, maybe France can help here. I think they also helped the greatest ally of the United States in the Middle East. But first things first. So what about this declaration of war from Germany towards Russia? Well, that was last week on Tuesday when Frau Baerbock was in Strasbourg at the Council of Europe, and she was asked by a British Tory what could be done so that Germany will soon deliver the tanks. As you might have noticed, all our dear friends and allies were pressuring us recently to deliver tanks to Ukraine, where other countries, such as France, for example, don't do that. Well, Germany gets pressured, others don't. Also, the United States, I think, they haven't delivered any main battle tanks yet, and by that time, they also hadn't made up their minds yet. But of course, Germany always gets publicly pressured and grilled about these questions. So, and then Frau Baerbock said, well, we are leading a war against Russia and not against each other. What she meant to say by that, or what she tried to say, is that we shouldn't pressure or fight each other, meaning that NATO countries or Western allies shouldn't be pointing fingers at each other, but we should focus on the common enemy, which is Russia. But she didn't just say that Russia is the enemy here. No, she said, and by the way, she said that in English. She said that we are leading a war against Russia, or we are in a war against Russia, not against each other. And because she is such an international law expert and also an English expert, because she studied international law in England, yes, this is why we cannot just write this off as, well, she doesn't know the subject very well, or she's not that good at English. No, she is the gold standard of proficiency in the English language and international law at the same time. So if anybody knows anything about these topics, it's her. She is the expert, and she said we are in a war against Russia. Well, now all kidding aside, this wasn't her first complete lapse. She can hardly formulate a single German sentence without two major grammar mistakes, or wrongfully substituting one word for the other, or mixing up vowels, saying words that don't even exist in the German language. Well, she is a horrible public speaker, and something is wrong in her brain when it comes to speaking. Somewhere between her brain and her mouth, there is some data that gets lost and some funky bits that get mixed in there. It's not clear German language that comes out of her mouth. But then at the same time, I do believe that in the German government and in military circles and in the foreign ministry, for example, I think that behind closed doors, the bureaucrats there, they openly talk about a war against Russia, and I think they act as if they were in an actual war against Russia. So yeah, in their mindset, they are at war with Russia, and they say that probably behind closed doors. Well, she, and I think this happens a lot lately, she said the quiet part or the fine print, she said that out loud. And of course, I am not a international law legal expert like she is, but seriously, at what point do you become one of the conflicting factions in such a conflict? We are delivering all the material, we are doing all the intelligence work here, we are doing all the surveillance, we feed them all this information, and yeah, without Western, and by we, of course, I don't mean Germans, I mean all the other Western countries as well, first and foremost the United States, of course. So without foreign support, I think the Ukrainian resistance would crumble within a matter of days. And as I said before in a video, yeah, at what point are we actually just directly involved? I mean, we train them, we give them all the vehicles, and the only thing that's missing is that we're not actually fighting there with boots on the ground. And once again, it is very important in a sentence that she said like that. When she says we, who is we? Well, that was the Council of Europe. This is an institution of the European Union, and that means she meant the European Union. European Union member states, that's what we was supposed to mean in this statement. I think this is also a very important side note. It wasn't a NATO meeting, it was an EU meeting. All right, so I believe 14 Leopard 2 tanks will be delivered soon, they say, and that means that Ukrainian tank crews will have to be trained in Germany, most probably. But a lot of other NATO member states also use this tank. It is maybe important to add that maybe during the Cold War, tanks such as these were produced in an industrialized fashion, but nowadays, where the demand is pretty low and people thought that these tanks would no longer be needed in conflicts of the future, etc., now it is more workbench production and no longer mass production. Also, if they need service and replacement parts, well, that could become a big problem because replacement parts are very rare right now, I believe. And that is why some commenters said that the country that profits most from that is once again the United States, because if all these Leopard tanks, or many of them, go now to the Ukrainian front and it is shown that they cannot be serviced that easy and that there is problems with supply of replacement parts, then a lot of countries would choose a US tank maybe in the future. And that could be, once again, great business for the US defense industry. Of course, now that the decision has been made that Germany will deliver tanks, they didn't get a single day of rest. No, now we have to also send them the Eurofighter Typhoon, I think it is called. It is a fighter plane, the most modern fighter plane that Germany has. But also a very stealthy and modern submarine is needed by Ukraine for fighting the Russians in the Black Sea. It is a submarine of the class 212A, and it has a diesel and a fuel cell engine, so electric and diesel. It can be very, very silent and it can operate in shallow waters. So I'm not an expert on these things, but well, I think some German submarines in the Black Sea would be very dangerous for the Black Sea fleet of the Russians. But once again, the problem here becomes, well, do you now train a Ukrainian submarine crew like you would train a tank crew? I think maybe it's easier to learn how to operate a Leopard 2 tank. I have no idea how long it would take to train a Ukrainian submarine crew. But whatever. I mean, you can just use German submarine crews and just tell the world that they're Ukrainians. I mean, who can prove it unless you can make some prisoners here? Maybe Germans will actually fight in these submarines, and they will not just be officially fighting there, but they will say that, oh, it's Ukrainians in German submarines, sure. But with these examples, you see how childish and how weird these arguments are when you say that, oh no, we're not in a war against Russia, of course not. We're just supporting Ukraine to defend themselves. Yeah, when the only thing that's missing in all these vehicles and in all this equipment is the actual German soldiers who are operating these machines. So as long as you train some Ukrainian dude, put him in the vehicle, tell him where to go and in what direction to fire, you can always say, oh no, we're not fighting the Russians. No, it's those Ukrainians. We're just giving them stuff. We're not doing any fighting. No. But the relevant question is, of course, for how long will Russia be okay or go along with this version of the story, with this narrative that we're not actually interfering here. We are not actually an active faction in this conflict. Anyway, let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. Servus, Kameraden.